Hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight to listen to the No Excuse podcast. Here we is. We have some special guests here. I'm going to introduce them in just a second. But like I said, I got the Unspoken Truth. Don't forget to get your copy at KeenanHudson.com. Don't forget, it's a great read. Give it to your niece, your nephew, your son, your grandson, anybody that you believe that will be impacted by this book. A lot of you guys have known this book to be a real impact around the world. So y'all go ahead and get your copy. Don't forget. So here we are. We have our great guest here again. We got Mr. Carlos up in the house. How you doing today, Carlos?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to tonight's topic. I've been thinking about it for a while and doing it on a larger scale
Yeah,
with a
yeah.
lot of people being able to listen to it is important to me. And I
Cool,
want to thank
cool,
Dr.
cool,
Carter for coming in. She's a special guest, so I'm very grateful to her.
cool, cool, cool. How you doing, Miss Jax?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here with you all.
Okay, okay, okay. And then our very special guest here, Dr. Corder, Dr. McCorder. Wow. It's a
Hi,
pleasure to have you on here. Please tell us
um,
how you feeling tonight.
I feel amazing. I am so honored to be a part of you guys tonight. I really am. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh wow! Thank you so much. Thank you for so much for coming in. And like I said, we have a powerful subject tonight. Topic. Like I say, for the No Excuse podcast, it says we must allow for differences. Wow, Carlos, do you want me to just expand a little bit, or do you want to take it away? Because I know you came up with the topic, but it's totally up to you. But I'm ready to hear all the input on this because it could go
Yes,
a
so,
lot of ways.
so this topic has arisen many times, and Yex and I were actually in a program where somebody was facilitating the program, and he suggested that all African Americans should actually just buy, products from themselves in order to raise, economically. And when I told him, well, what about those who want to disagree, start their own businesses and contribute differently to other people? And his suggestion was, you know, social engineering. And I don't think that, we can easily say, well, that's an ignorant person. But if you take an author like John McWhorter, who wrote a book called Woke Racism, How a New Religion Has Betrayed Black America, and he spoke about this dangers of the elect telling other African Americans how they should think and how they should live. And the response that he got back was, you're just as racist as the white people, you're being, a traitor, so on and so forth. I see the danger. And so one time, a teacher of mine, a professor of mine told me, whenever we see that monolith, we should always beware because that's
Mhm.
the first sign that society is about to go into a totalitarianism, into a monarchical mentality and a despotic state. So I just want to have a conversation about what it means to have the right to decline to be a part of something, even though you're trying to be grouped in by people who think they know what's in the best interest as far as justice is concerned.
Mhm. Open floor, open floor.
So I have a question. What is difference?
Mm.
So differences for me is the right to attain the kind of information and knowledge my own way without being forced into a certain kind of mentality or ideology that's being promoted by a certain group or society at large. And so if I can't arrive at the kind of understanding that you're telling me I should have, then immediately that's a sign of violence and a violation of my rights. Because how am I supposed to actually really understand how you came to your own knowledge if you're telling me that only one way of thinking is allowed? And I've learned that if I don't allow for differences, understanding that a mind can't be forced. You
Mm.
can't like give knowledge to somebody. That's a process that has to take place. A lot of critical thinking that has to take place. A lot of thought, comparing information, trying to resolve contradictions, so on and so forth. I not only end up hurting the people that I'm opposing, but also the people that I'm trying to align myself with, because they could come to the same conclusion with me by many different methods and approaches. So if I actually oppose these people that, don't have the same kind of ideas that I do, I necessarily also hurt the people that I'm trying to bring on my side because I'm forcing them in a way that isn't natural at all to attain knowledge. So that's what I think I mean by differences.
I asked that question because that is something that we're faced with every day, difference. And most people make difference out to be bad. They say that if you're different, you don't fit in. If you're different, you're weird. If you're different, something's wrong with you. So that's why I asked, what does difference mean? Most people are afraid to be different. Most people are afraid to go against the norm. If everybody's going left and left gonna make you fall off the end of that cliff, most people will go left instead of going right down that path that will lead them to success, because they don't want to be outside of the norm of difference. But I beg to differ to say that difference sometimes means uniqueness. Difference means gifted. Difference may mean to some people optimistic, authentic. And that's what I believe a lot of us, well, I won't say me, but a lot of us don't embrace. We don't embrace our difference. We want to fit in because that's what society tells us to do. We want to be liked because that's what society says has to happen in our life. So that's why I ask you, what is difference? What does difference really mean? Because if we can really grasp what difference really means, it will not be a hard concept to bring about change, because difference is change.
Yes.
So I want to jump in very quick to kind of springboard off of what the sister was saying and speak to what you were saying too, Carlos. I think you took one vantage point when you started speaking about how we ally ourselves and need to ally ourselves with individuals, and how we can deter that by not being able to embrace differences. But I also believe that the only, not the only, but one of the ways that we make social change is by being able to appeal to the individuals who are in the positions that the change needs to occur in to make those decisions. And we can't appeal to individual natures by being, I'm not going to say not necessarily radical, by being aggressive, by doing things that just someone wouldn't be receptive to. And what you were saying made me think about a book that I recently read called Collaborating with the Enemy, and thinking about how when we want to come to general consensus, we have to be able to see things from other people's perspectives. And very often when we come together, we want to impose our perspectives on other people. And how if we just shifted that approach, we'd be able to come to a space of, again, general consensus, where we're able to come to resolution, to make social change, to embrace the differences in people. So yeah, that's what that made me think about.
Wow, and you make a good point too. Like you said, being able to see from other people's perspective. As I mentioned briefly, when we were behind stage, that sometimes, coming from different cultures, different backgrounds, we view things differently. Something that may be right to you may be wrong to me. You know what I'm saying? You may take something as a form of joking, but I may take it as a form of disrespect. Again, as I mentioned earlier, some of the words of MLK, when he said, that a person should not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. It shouldn't be, because I think and see who you are, you don't belong in this program. Why? Because I'm not fit? Or you assume that I'm illiterate? No, that shouldn't be the case. I should have the same right to take the test or do whatever training, anything necessary, or obtain any of the proper apparatus, as anyone else. It shouldn't be a judgmental call. But like Carlos properly said, we must allow for differences, meaning that we must allow ourselves to see in a broader horizon, not just, that tunnel vision. It can't just be, it's either my way or the highway. No, let's hear that other person's opinion. Let's hear that other person's, train of thought. You know what I'm saying? Even though we may be on this podcast right here, we may have a disagreement about something, but we never want to dismiss, the opinion of another. You know what I mean?
Yeah, now don't get me wrong, Keenan. There's a purpose in having stereotypes. There's a purpose in having discriminatory practices because that's how we gain knowledge. If everything was the same, we would have nothing to compare with. The reason we understand, for example, colors is because there's so many different ones that on a spectrum we could understand the differences. And it's the same thing with human beings. If there was only one prototype, we wouldn't be able to understand or acknowledge or be aware of different characteristics. So, stereotypes and discrimination does play a role in knowledge. The problem is that when we don't check it when it comes to other individuals, then it runs, buck wild. And we have to be able to understand exactly how a human being develops, and essentially it's through his mind, through his conceptual faculty, to actually understanding what's around his environment, knowing the differences, putting all kinds of information together, and forming what we understand as knowledge. You can't sit anybody down and just grab some information and stuff it into them and expect that to be the result of what you've come to in terms of a conclusion. So if it's the mind that we're trying to target in terms of like convincing people, then let us first understand how the mind operates. And I have no problem with people telling me, listen, I have a right to not, do this for you or do that. Like, this is my school, this is my property, whatever may have you. What I have a problem with is this idea that everybody has to think the same, everybody can't defer, and everybody has to follow one kind of path when it comes to social change, because what ends up happening is once that social change is created, what's going to happen to those who want to deviate or those who want to pass laws that they think are different? So you end up like going down this road that actually perpetuates the very thing you're trying to get rid of. And, to touch on what Dr. McCorder was talking about, those differences, even within our communities, they matter, because I've been in academic settings where I thrive in educational settings. I love to learn. I love to challenge myself. And it bothers me a lot when professors overlook my effort to pay attention to those who not only aren't doing the work, but who also are ridiculing others for trying their best. And so we have to understand that even in those spaces where we're all like trauma ridden, we've all been abused. How do you then tell me when I'm trying to make an honest effort at changing that I shouldn't pull away from the very people who fit within that category but are ridiculing me for trying my best? And so, even within that book of woke racism, McCorder says we have to understand when we speak about eliminating things like segregation, that we're putting minorities in the box with minorities, and some of them are actually punishing those that are trying to come up, all under this idea that everything should be the same, everything should be equal, but we end up punishing the ones that want to be different. Because like she said, some of us are unique. Some of us like see life differently. Some of us are special in our own way, and we want to appreciate who we are. But if I can't say I'm different from the very person next to me that's been through the same experiences, because he's thinking that I should stay on the same level as he, be it I'm being abused, traumatized, taken for granted, working at my own expense, whatever it may have, it actually just perpetuates the very violence we claim we want to get rid of.
Wow.
That is so true. I was listening, and one of the things that I often say to people, what is communication? And most people think that communication is talking, but communication is 99% of listening. And most people never listen. They will hear you, but they don't listen. And if they are listening, they listen to respond, not listen to understand. So when you have people that are trying to be different, no matter what genre of different they're trying to be, most of the people that are judging, most of the people that are putting them in categories are the people that have their own opinion, and they want you to listen or obey and follow what they're saying, but they're not listening to you say that you want to be different. They're not listening to understand that you are saying, this doesn't work for me. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't work for me. I don't want to go here. I want to do this. I don't want to have that. I want to have this. And if you don't accept this over here that they want you to have, then they're not listening to understand you. They're listening to give you an answer and to judge you. And in our communities, as you were saying a few minutes, Carlos, in our communities, usually that's the thing that we do to ourselves. We give our opinion because that opinion either has been taught to us, that opinion has been given to us as right, or that opinion is popular because we don't want to go against the prick. So we put everybody that we come in contact with in that same category. And when they don't meet up to what we think that expectation of that category is, we begin to tear down the very thing that we said we wanted to build up, which is our people, which is our youth, our adults, our men, our women, because they don't fit into whatever that category is. I learned a very valuable lesson working behind the wall. And I remember I've always been one, I love to listen to understand. I don't try to listen to try to tell you that you're wrong or right, because opinions are neither right or wrong. They just are. And we all have them. But I've always been one that would listen to understand. And I remember I was in the dorm one time. This was years ago when I first started. And I'm going to be honest, I was a newbie. I'm from North Carolina. I didn't know anything about gangs. I really didn't. I was fresh from the tobacco field going into the prison system working because it was the best thing paying at the time. And I remember I used to hear them say, OG, that's an OG. So I went to him. I said, what is an OG? Because I didn't know. And I remember the young man said to me, he said, Miss Mack, he said, you don't want to know what an OG is. And I said, I really do. I want to know. And I kept going back until he told me. I just kept being a pest until he told me. And he said, and he told me, he said he was from California, make a long story short. He said, ma'am, he said, I didn't choose this. It chose me. My mother was in it. My father was in it. My family is in it. He had drops on his face. And he told me which each one of them stood for his mother, his brother, his sister that he lost. And he was just telling me his story. And I was standing there and I was looking because it was one of the most extraordinary things I had ever heard coming from the South. But at that very moment, I can honestly say that more than ever, it made me want to listen to understand. Because I could have been one of those people to say, you crazy, you a gang member, you did this, you deserve what you got. How can I tell that person that when that was all that they knew? So I said that whole story to say this. Whenever it comes to being different, as you were talking about, Carlos, whenever it comes to making a difference and changing, you got to be a person that wants to listen to understand, because you don't know that person's story. You don't know that person's backdrop. You know what you see, but you don't know the whole picture. You don't know why that person is doing what they're doing.
Real quick and contextualize a little bit, because you said something very profound, Dr. Makata, and it lends itself to something that Carlos said earlier when he said, if we want to get to the root of this and we want to understand, then we need to seek to understand the human mind and the way that it functions. And you said something when you started rattling off things, and you said, they don't want to go against the grain. You said they didn't want to do this and they didn't want to do that and they don't want to go against the grain. So we have to think about humans as creatures who seek to herd themselves in social groups. And what that means for them is that even if they have their uniqueness, that sometimes they are too afraid to share it because they're afraid to go against the grain and do and have exactly what you expressed happen, which is be removed from the group. And this is that very primitive nature of the human that drives them into that type of herd mentality in a negative way rather than a positive way. So I think it's really important when we're thinking about these things and we're thinking about how they show up and how we can bring resolution to them. We have to think about the historical references and how that really looks like in relation to like human biology. So historically speaking, especially in brown and black communities, individuals have felt punishment, like literal harm, death, extreme violence from being different. So there has been this shame, this association, and this understanding, this conditioning that if I act differently, these are the
Yes.
consequences, these are the repercussions. So whether it be generational trauma that's passed on genetically or just the social conditioning, there are a lot of people who are deterred from not just being their individual selves, but embracing other people's differences because of that.
Mm,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
mhm.
There's something. You want to go, Keenan?
No, go. You go.
So Yex and I were having a conversation, and we were disagreeing. But she said something that strikes at the heart of the matter of what she just said, and what Dr. McCarter's saying, and what we're talking about in general. She said you're trying to do the same thing I'm doing and disagreeing. And it's interesting that people miss out on the very act that they're admitting to once a disagreement happens. Once I disagree with you, what is going on with me in responding to you that's trying to convince you? So I'm appealing to a part of you that I'm acknowledging you're trying to appeal to mine as well, which is you're trying to provide me with something that allow my mind to freely come to the conclusion that you're trying to give me. And so we have to acknowledge and not take that for granted because it represents the very kind of peace that's required for us to have that kind of conversation. And there's no violence in that. If you say something and I disagree and I immediately offer a counter, then what I'm doing is exactly the same thing you're doing. I'm trying to appeal to your mind. And the only way we can get there is by allowing the freedom to think. That's it. So as soon as a disagreement happens, we should be celebrating it rather than getting upset because we're granting each other a humanity that's often missed when it comes to differences and disagreements. And that's completely critical to understand.
Can I say this before you say that? My favorite thing to say with people when we're having a conversation and we don't agree, I'll immediately say we can agree to disagree.
Disagree.
Because you can find common ground in disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
You can literally find common ground in disagreeing. You don't have to fall out. So I'll just smile and say we can agree to disagree.
But see, but Dr. McCord, like you said though, see, you can do that. But oftentimes most people, they don't accept the fact that, okay, even though we can agree to disagree, they don't, it's sort of a huge thing of pride, when it comes to a lot of people. And sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow or not necessarily swallow, but to throw out the way, because if you have that sense of pride, you will never be able to learn anything. You'll never be able to learn what another person's point of view is. You know what I'm saying? The things they've been through, like you mentioned earlier, you wanted to know what an OG was. It's some things that you guys may know that I may not know, but I want to ask and figure out what it is. But if people are constantly shut down and kicked to the curve because of the things that they were brought up in, the culture differences they were brought up in, like you said, it deters you from like even wanting to open up or even wanting to put yourself out there with other people or even express and shout for help. Because a lot of people in these situations need help, you know what I mean? Or need, some type of assistance or guidance. But again, pride. Before we can continue though, let's if y'all want to chat, look at some of these things in the chat because people are mentioning some pretty good things here. Yex, if you want to go ahead and shoot off, we can just read them off, or we can expound on a couple little things if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see what's on the screen right now?
Oh, so yeah, it says colorism, prejudices, and discrimination was created to divide us as a people.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I completely agree. I think that I don't remember if I was saying this to you, Carlos, or my best friend, but um, I believe that racism is actually um, a symptom of elitism, and it's used as a divisionary tool to make us feel like there are these levels to poor or these levels to middle class or anything other than what happens. And what that does is it creates all of that, not just colorism. We have interpersonal racism, and we have all kinds of different afflictions within and outside of the community. So I agree, it's definitely something to divide us.
Cool. Carlos, you want to read that one by Carlos Parks?
We submit ourselves to this treatment because people of non-European races try too hard to assimilate. Asians deal with Asians. They could care less about Western ideals. We need to stop allowing them the power to affect our emotions.
Mm.
And so I immediately have a problem with that, because this idea that Asians deal with Asians creates the very monolith that I'm challenging at the moment. And so the person who made this comment, Carlos, I want you to consider that as a Hispanic, I grew up with many Hispanics who disliked me very much for the positions I took in life, went against me and opposed me very much. Some of those acts were violent, and I've seen it over and over again within white communities, within African American, whatever have you. Everybody doesn't agree just because they're in the same race. Everybody doesn't purchase the same products. And if the idea is that we should, then it creates the very problem that we're trying to challenge. There's no control in that at all. Once you create a society where you expect everybody to just have the same ideas, behave the same exact way, follow the same politics, if you just completely got rid of the Republican Party and the African Americans that want to participate in that, you're going to get Democrats who are actually going to enact violence against them. And we know that the Democrats have largely been responsible as well for our mass incarceration rates. And, if you take away Booker T. Washington and you just leave us with a W.E.B. Du Bois, or if you take away a Martin Luther King and just leave us, with a Malcolm X, so on and so forth, what would become of us if we don't allow, this idea of what race represents when it comes to admitting of differences? Like, it just creates a mess and problems. So we have to get away from this idea that Asians should stick with Asians, and this is a model for us to follow. It is not at all. And at work, it's not even true. It's not true at all.
Mm.
They may have an idea of what being successful is like in a different country, but nonetheless, that doesn't discount the fact that they may not even be friends, that some may not be allowed to come over other houses, that may not even engage in certain relationships, and all those things have to be taken into account.
Mm. Okay. Cool. Would you like to read that one? Sort of what you spoke on, Doctor.
Sure. A lot of people are stuck in their ways, so they don't know how to agree to disagree. And I agree with that to a certain extent.
Mm.
I personally believe, because we all have our opinions. Opinions are neither right or wrong, they just are, and everyone has one.
Mm-hmm.
I personally believe that when you agree to disagree, it has to be a personal thing. It's personal because you understand that you're not always right and they're not always wrong. You can agree to disagree, and it has to become personal because you understand that everybody's opinion matters. And when you can take on that, just that little part right there, that everyone's opinions matter, whether it matters to you or not. I didn't say it matters to you. I just said their opinions matter. Mm-hmm. When you can look at it like that, you don't take it personal. The thing that causes conflict most of the time is that we take it personal. You don't hear me. I'm trying to tell you what's right. Don't you understand? This is why it's right. That's when it becomes a problem. And that's when disagreeing cannot be agreeable. But when you realize that everybody has an opinion, everybody's entitled to their opinion, right, wrong, or indifferent, we all have them. And just because their opinion is their opinion, it does not make them no more less of a person than what you are. That's where real difference come in. We want people to have our opinion. We want them to be the same. Then how can we say we're allowing them to be different? If we are truly going to immerse ourselves in difference, we have to allow people to have opinions, right, wrong, or indifferent. That doesn't change yours. It shouldn't change you, because you have an opinion too. So I sort of agree with what she said, but for the most part, I don't, because disagreeing agreeably, that's a stance you have to take. Just because you tell me that the sky is purple and it's falling, and I'm looking and I see that it's green and it's still there, why am I going to fall out with you because you see purple and I see green? That's your opinion. So we can agree to disagree. Right, wrong, and indifferent. We all have an opinion. And we have to have the right to exercise it. If it's not causing you death, danger, or harm, if it's not taking food out of your mouth, taking from your kids, enabling your family, what is wrong with allowing a person to have an opinion? Because their opinion is different.
All right, anybody want to tackle this? You want me to tackle it?
Go ahead, Keenan.
You want me to tackle it?
Go ahead.
Okay, it said culture comes from your community. Hispanic is a group of people who share a language. It's not a race. Therefore, there are multiple cultures within the subgroup of Hispanic. You may not be accepted by Mexicans or Salvadorians. They are also Hispanics, but they don't operate like Puerto Ricans or Cubans. I love the discussion, but it's just a discussion on opinions. And what you see as a resolution, I may not agree with. Our perspectives differ, which will change how we see things.
Perfect.
Wow. Yeah, I'm leaving it up to you, Carlos. I'm leaving it up to you.
And if I was to tell Carlos, listen, we have the same name, we're both Hispanic. We should not be disagreeing right now. But no, he's absolutely right. You know,
you said both of you guys are Hispanic?
No, I'm just saying we may be Hispanic.
Oh,
to tell him that, you know, would just be to like contradict myself. But like I want to mention something that like affected me profoundly, and I never expected this at all. But I want to preface it by mentioning studies that are done with infants, and they test to see the level of reaction and discrimination by the surprise reaction that they get when presented with certain information. So they'll give them certain like pictures, and you know the baby would just look naturally and have no, you know, significant reaction. But once they're presented with information that is contradictory, you know, their eyes lighten up, and you know they have this expression of shock. So you can measure that and say, okay, something's going on here that's drawing their attention, and it's because a difference has been presented. And I have to admit that I never expected when I joined a program about higher learning that the most valuable thing that I would take away from that space is how many differences there are. And what the differences allow me to do is reconsider my own position, go back into my cell, make sure that the information that I held on to was logical, because it required me to put it together in a way that said, if I'm right, then I should be able to make a logical argument to convince others. If I was in a space with everybody that thought the same, the danger is that nothing would make me rethink my own positions and approach to life, my own philosophy and ideas about what is right or wrong. But being in a space with those men who completely like disagreed with me in many things, allow me to reflect and say, okay, if I can't convince them, even though I think I'm right, then let me at least go back and go over all of the information that has led me to the conclusion that I draw. But you'll never get that in places where people think the same.
So speaking to something that Dr. McCarter said when you were saying that everybody not only deserves to come to their own conclusions, that they have to it has to be by their own choice, by their own volition, to agree, to disagree, or to be in that space, or to do whatever. We can't force individuals, that everyone is deserving and entitled of their own. And it made me think about what Carlos said when you brought up how I acknowledged that we were doing the same thing, wanting to be right. And for me, like, a model that I live by is like, give what you need. And in that moment, I think it is very difficult for people to give what they need. And what they need is what Dr. McCarter said, is to be seen and to have their own entitlement. We want our own choice and have our autonomy over ourselves to do whatever we want. And then we want to trample on others when there's differs from ours, instead of being able to say at the root of that is autonomy. Let me give them what I need, which is my own right to do whatever I want. And I think it goes back to what Keenan said. When Keenan started hitting on something, I think he hit the nail on the head with the pride. And it was a thought that I was having, like, at the simultaneous time when you start saying it, and you're like, pride gets in the way and it's a big pill to swallow. But it's bigger than just pride, because when pride shows up, ego is accompanied, and ego shows up in the form of protection. And so many people have learned to protect themselves by using their ego, as a buffer, as the armor. And when we think about wanting to be right, some people literally will take the argument as like life or death. Like they're fighting tooth and nail. They're willing to die atop of the hill of being right, just for the sake of being, because they want to be right versus someone else being wrong.
Yeah.
So I think when we take into consideration all of those dynamics, the need to give what you want or what you need, and the ability to see when you're wrong or when you're doing the same exact thing, and the pride to show up, that at the base of that is a lack of development and skill. And how do we empower people with the skill to be able to even recognize any of those things, to be able to do what Carlos was saying, and turn inwardly on themselves and self-reflect. And it makes me think about this book, and me and Carlos was just talking about it too recently. It's called I'm Right, You're Wrong, Now What? How to Break the Impasse. Because that's the real question. I'm right, you're wrong, now what? Okay, you're right, so what? Right? How are we going to be able to be in what we're talking about, which is a beloved community together, despite our disagreements or our differences?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
I
it's
love
great,
it.
great.
You
Yeah,
know,
man. Mm-hmm.
it's so important, it's so important that we, as I call it woke, we as the woke generation, and I don't mean the older generation or the younger generation. When I say woke, I mean those that want understanding, those that want to understand. We as the woke generation, that we teach. A lot of times people want to go line upon line, precept upon precept. The best way to teach someone is to be that example. And if you can be that example in what it means to be able to disagree agreeably, if you can be that example of what it means to be authentically yourself,
Yes.
on a good day, a bad day, a day with a wig, a day with your wig flying off, whatever.
Yes, sis.
So the
If you
wigs.
can be authentically you,
Yes.
Woo!
you can commandeer everyone around you to
Yes.
find that safe space to be themselves, because they know when they misspeak, they're not going to be judged. They know that when they're having a good day, a bad day, a right day, a wrong day, that there's a safe space with you, because they understand that you accept their difference. If it's not harming someone, taking someone's life, or something that is detrimental, allow people the space to be themselves. And for me, I can honestly say that's what I found in my life that has caused people to be drawn. Even when I was in corrections, I didn't have to do a lot of yelling. I ain't gonna do that anyway. It makes my throat. My thing is always service with a smile.
I know that's right.
But I could always get people to do whatever it was I needed them to do because I listened to understand. I gave them the freedom to have their own opinion and to be different, as long as it wasn't hurting, impacting, or stopping someone else from doing the same thing. And if we can authentically do that, I'm me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I normally say 370, 367, which means 365 and twice on Sunday. I'm me. I tell people I'm just as country as a Bella Hay. And I do not back down from that. I've been in crowds with people that speak eloquently like this. And I've been in say, what's going on, y'all? And I can accept everybody where they are because I allow people to be their authentic self because I know I'm not changing. Either you like me, love me, or leave me, but you're going to always love me. I know. But
think about a quote.
Huh?
That makes me think about a quote about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the quote goes, diversity is being invited to a dance. Equity is being asked to dance on the dance floor. And inclusion is being able to dance however you want.
Go, sister, you hit it right on the head. I went to an equity, diversity, and inclusion meeting, and I'm always one. You might not want to ask me, and they asked me what did it mean, and this is what I told them. I said, inclusion means that you give me a seat at the table. I don't want to have a seat at the table. I want to be a part of designing the table. You can include me and not want me there. But I want to belong because belonging and inclusion is two different things.
Yes.
Don't include me just say that you're including me because that just means you gave me a seat. I want to belong. I want to know that my presence belongs here. So I'm with you on that, sis. Yes, I am.
This is an excellent opportunity to segue into solutions about allowing for differences. And I want to do that by placing responsibility on the takers rather than those who offer. Because the takers get to refuse whatever offer they think is perpetuating the problem. And so I could give you an example, and this is how I came across this idea. I was in prison and somebody offered me some food. And it was in front of everybody. And I refused it because I didn't really know him. So he told me I was ungrateful. And I told him, well, what gives you the moral right or the moral high ground to get upset at me because you're offering me something that I don't want? And so why don't I get the right to be offended because you're offering me something that I don't want? And so there's this idea that the givers get to set the moral standard and that the ones who are receiving it have little choice but to take it. And that ends up putting us in a lot of problems. So we have to understand as a society that wants equity, diversity, and inclusion to refuse the very thing we see coming a long way that's going to perpetuate the very problems that we're trying to get rid of. And, as those who are putting politicians into power and are advocating for laws that a lot of people are telling us are in our best interest, we have to be very careful and not falling into that herd mentality just because they're saying you're the ones who are the recipients. And so therefore you should have a little say so in what we're offering you, whether it be $1 million against your morality, whether it be a house or housing at the expense of what your ideals are or your beliefs are, just some momentary benefit that completely goes against what you believe in just because you're the recipient. I think it's a terrible approach to take. So we have to, as givers, accept what we know is good for us and refuse, what it's not.
Absolutely.
Can I just say this one thing? Because that was loaded. That was really loaded. It really, really was. And I love it. But it was loaded. But I wanted to say, when it comes to something like that, who likes to be rejected?
Mm-hmm.
It's a spirit of rejection. And nobody wants to be rejected for anything. I'm coming to you, I'm being kind, and you're saying no. They're immediately offended because they feel rejected.
Mm-hmm.
That ain't got nothing to do with you. That's all on them.
Put that
I mean,
pride to the side.
I mean, there's nothing you can do about that because that's on them. But you have the right and the power of choice.
But I think you
But
can do
I
something
just,
about it. I think you can educate them.
huh?
I think you can do something about it. I think you can educate them in the process.
Yeah.
And like Carlos was saying, when you spoke back to that brother or whoever it was that was trying to get you to, be grateful about something you didn't want, you took an opportunity to educate them by saying, on what moral high ground do you stand to tell me that I just accept this? And it's crazy because I was just sharing this story where my neighbor was cutting my grass for me, and it's bothered me. It bothered me to the core for a lot of different reasons. And I didn't know how to tell this neighbor to stop cutting my grass because it seemed like a kind gesture. And I was questioning myself, should I be grateful? Should I be happy? This is an act. And my friend asked me, what if someone was giving you, what if a stranger was giving you flowers, right? It would come off creepy, right? So an act that is unwelcomed, no matter how nice it is, right? You don't have to accept it, just like
That's
Carl
right.
was saying. But I think what's coupled with that, I was trying to think, because it was an elderly woman, how to best meet this in kindness and how to approach it just like Carlos did by educating this person. And I think that's some of the best ways that we can meet any type of challenge. Not just this challenge is through attempting to through the path of least resistance with kindness and niceties, just trying to educate people.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Hey, and I know we passed like the 45-minute mark, but I know it's getting good. But yeah, y'all definitely, y'all expound on some good things. And as Yex was just saying, like you said, sometimes when you take that opportunity to educate somebody, whether they're willing to receive it or not, you planted the seed. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it takes a long time for people to get that increase, but hey, it's not your problem. You did what you did. May come another chance. You might have to water it. Yo, I told you. Trying to teach you again, but again, it's up to them to get the increase. So, but like I said, I know we're on the 47-minute mark. I know it's been a great podcast, and Carlos he just left.
I got
Carlos, wait,
too. I have to go.
Carlos just left. Like he just said, "Oh, he
I
ain't talking about that." He just rolled out. But
I got
no, something probably had
nice, Keenan. It was a
same,
blessing, Dr. McCarter. I really appreciate your
same here.
education. I'm gonna tune into your IG for sure. And I'll catch y'all another time. Peace.
All right, y'all take care. Take care, Yax. All right, again, see y'all later. Y'all take it easy. Don't forget the Unspoken Truth and Life Story. Don't forget it. You get it, KeenanHudson.com. It's amazing, really impact, especially for a lot of the youth. Get a lot of inserts. You got the Judge Learner on there. You got Dr. Gabard. You have a Influence Education. Hildebrand Pelzer there. But yeah, thank y'all so much for coming out. Viewers, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for the comments and everything. Doctor, we hope to have you on here again. That'd be amazing.
Yay.
That'd be great. But yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate everything.
This was amazing. Thank you, Carlo, for inviting me. Thank you, Keenan. This was amazing.
Yes, indeed. No
Thank
problem.
you. I'm so grateful. I really am.
Indeed. Thank you. So y'all have a blessed night, and we'll catch up next time.
All right.
All right. Bye. Good night, everybody.